Hello, my loves. It is time for us to chat about everything that I read in October. We have 6 things to get to. If you missed this month's content, we had 2 vlogs that went out. One was just a very cozy little autumnal reading vlog. And last week's video, we read a bunch of the scariest horror that I could find. I had a lot of fun filming both those videos, so if you missed them, I'll leave them linked in the description for you to check out. Okay, and without further ado, let's jump into everything that I read in October. First up, we have The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. This was such a sweet little cozy little small town romance. Our main character has inherited this cafe from her aunt, and she's trying to get her legs running this cafe, but really she's trying to figure out who she is and who she wants to be. And we also have this grumpy sunshine romance between her and the farmer, which is very, very cute and adorable. I will say this book has a lot of cheese, so if you're not someone who likes a cheesy book, this one is gonna be too much for you. I thought it was fun, but definitely not my favorite romance I've ever read. The romance itself wasn't particularly enticing to me. I liked the small town vibes. I liked the little mystery that we had in here as well, and the way that that unfolded. And I will be continuing in this series. This is book 2. I just saw it in a bookshop last week. I didn't pick it up because I'd like to read it on audiobook. So I will be continuing in the Dream Harbor series, and I am excited to see the next romance that's going to unfold. I think the premise of this series is that we're set in the same small town, and we have our recurring characters who are always back, and then we're just focusing on a different romance in each one, which I think is very sweet. So overall, not my favorite thing I've ever read, but I think is a really great escapist autumnal time if you're looking for that. Okay, next up I read The City in Glass by Nevo, and this is one of my favorite things I have ever read. I love Nevo's writing so much. I have read the novella series, The Singing Hills cycle, and I think what they do is absolutely incredible. She has this really incredible way of storytelling, and the Singing Hills cycle is all about storytelling. And so I was really, really interested. This is my first Nevo that I've picked up outside of the Singing Hills cycle, and I was interested to see if her other stuff was gonna land for me as well as this novella series has, and it knocked it out of the park. It was so incredible. We're following a demon and an angel, and the demon is kind of watching over this city. This is her city, and she cares so deeply for all of the people in the city, and we're watching the city get destroyed, and we're seeing what it was like as the city was at its height, and we're getting to see this demon do her work in the city and be so in love with the city and also be a demon. Like, she's definitely a dark creature. And we also get to know this angel and their story together, and how they are so similar to each other because they are both not human, but obviously extremely different. I loved the way that this ended. I think the ending will piss a lot of people off, but I thought it was perfect. I think this has been pitched as like an angel and a demon love story situation, and that I would not expect that going into reading this book. This is a love letter written to a city. If you've ever fallen in love with a city, this is the book for you. The writing in here is so eloquent. It's so beautiful, just absolutely stunning, and I have no notes on this book. I thought it was incredible. Okay, now we need to talk about some horror. So I picked up Uzumaki for that horror video. I really wanted to love this, and I did end up giving it 3 stars. It is a story of a town that is contaminated by spirals. The horrifying thing in this book is a shape, and I found it to be so incredibly disgusting and hard to read, and that's obviously on purpose. I'm not typically a fan of body horror, and because this is a manga, we are seeing on every single page just disgusting, horrifying things. So if you are not a fan of body horror, I would not recommend picking this up. But the craft in here, impeccable. Junji Ito as an author, amazing. I really liked the afterword in here, actually. I thought it was very cheeky and very fun. I really enjoyed all the chapters, all the episodes that we were in, finding out this new and horrifying thing. I felt very connected to our characters and this family that we were following, this girl and her boyfriend. But I think ultimately, because it was so exhausting and disgusting, it was not my favorite thing that I read this month, but I do recommend it. And I'm excited because I think one of you actually just purchased this off my Panga, so I'm going to wrap this up and ship this to you. One of my new all-time favorite horror books, Pet Sematary. I'm so glad I did that video because I don't think I ever would have read this without that, and this is such an incredible exploration of grief. I feel like it is now my personal mission to convince more people to read this because I thought this was gonna be spooky cat vibes, and it is a spooky cat, but it's really not about a spooky cat. It's about grief and death and what you would do to save your loved ones, and the horrible things that we do when we are grieving and trying to grapple with that situation. It's so fascinating to watch Lewis just spiral in this book and be so overcome with grief. And this is not my first Stephen King. This is my third. I read his fantasy fairy tale, and then also Holly, which is like the fourth or fifth book in a series because it won the Goodreads Choice Award. So I had to read it for a video. I don't think that was the best choice for my first horror book by Stephen King. Anyways, I am now gonna go back and read a lot of Stephen King's backlist. So actually, let me know in the comments. If you're a Stephen King fan, what's your favorite Stephen King? Where should I go after Pet Sematary, knowing that I absolutely adored this? I think the thing that really calls to me about Stephen King's writing is that I felt so connected to this family because they were flawed in such normal ways, in such ordinary ways. I feel like often we have characters who are a little bit two-dimensional. They exist as a foil to another character, and really only our main character is the person that we know a lot about, and they're either a good person or they're a bad person, and they're maybe struggling with some central theme. But these people just seem like they're so complicated in such a mundane way that it feels like you could be living right next door to them. This could happen to your family. And I loved the pacing of this. There were times at which I was begging for it to go faster, and there were times at which I was begging for it to slow down and give me a second to catch my breath. I thought it was so exceptionally well done. I think I will definitely reread this in the future because it was just so incredible. If you read one thing that I read this month, please let it be Pet Sematary, although it is horrifying. So I would probably look up trigger warnings for this because I was expecting spooky cat and I got a lot more than that. Okay, then we read The Changeling by Victor LaValle, and I did enjoy this. I think maybe Victor LaValle and I are not super compatible as reader and author because I also didn't love Lone Women. I am gonna try to check out a novella from him in the future, so if you have recs, I would love to hear them in the comments. The Changeling is such an interesting book to me because it is so many things, and I read a review that said that the book itself is a changeling, and I think that is so true because it kind of feels like it's in two parts, and there are a lot of different like sections, parts to this book. It really, to me, feels like it's kind of cut in two, where for the first chunk of the book, we are getting so attached to this family, and we actually get a fair amount of background on our main character and his life growing up and his mother and his father. And then we also see him have his own child with his wife. After Apollo's son Brian is born, his wife is really struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety. Something really horrible happens to his child. We see him grappling with that grief, and we see him grappling with the situation and how it happened. That in and of itself is horrific and an important story to tell, and I think I would have been happy just reading that story because I think it is a really important one that needs to be said, and I think it was beautifully done. Victor LaValle got us so attached to this family and then tore it apart and made us sit there and watch, and it was awful to read. And then we have this second half of the book where we enter into this conversation about fairy tales and things get a little supernatural. And I think it is so interesting that those two things were put together into one book. And I think maybe my brain wasn't able to wrap itself around that switch and that change from this really heavy, dense horror into this still horrifying, but much more fast-paced and much more fairy tale-like story. I still liked it. I gave it a 3.75, but I'm interested to see if Victor LaValle's novellas do any better for me. Okay, my battery died, but we are back to talk about our final book, which is We Used to Live Here. I've been waiting to find a new favorite haunted house story, and this one I think has made the list. It is just so good at being a haunted house story. And I think what made it so enjoyable for me is because it brought me back to some of my favorite haunted house stories, mainly House of Leaves. I definitely don't want to make a comparison to House of Leaves and you think that you're getting House of Leaves because this is very, very different. But the little snippets of multimedia that we did get in here, the Reddit posts, the newspaper clippings, the way that we got this lore around this house that our main characters are living in and got to find out things from the outside while still remaining really insulated in this story, gave me kind of a taste of that documents written about a place that doesn't exist vibe that we see in House of Leaves. And so I really enjoyed that aspect in here, but it is a very different story. And I think if anything, I wanted to stay in the haunted house for longer. I wish this book was longer. I gave it 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. The way that this starts is that we have our 2 main characters, Carly and Eve. They have just moved into this house and they're going to flip it. That's what they do. They flip houses. And I really enjoyed exploring their relationship dynamic throughout the book. What happens is one day this family knocks on the door when Eve is home alone and they say, "We used to live here. Can I give my family a tour?" Eve initially doesn't want to let them, but then their daughter's really sad and she eventually lets them in. And then things start to happen that make them prolong their stay more and more and more. And they are super weirdly religious, and the wife says some really disrespectful things about their relationship because they're both women, they're gay. I think it's just so well done because it seems so, again, so mundane and so ordinary, but it's just this like creeping horror that you're like, something is wrong here. This seems so normal, but something is so wrong, and I need to get these people out of my house. It's just so fascinating to watch it unfold. And we start to learn that there's a history of people in the house kind of going crazy. There's a lot said about Capgras syndrome. And I remember learning about Capgras syndrome in my like freshman year psychology class in college and wondering why more horror has not been written about Capgras syndrome, because to me it feels like the most terrifying thing ever. With Capgras syndrome, you believe that your loved ones have been replaced by doppelgangers or aliens or other beings, and sometimes that even you yourself have been replaced. That is like my biggest fear, is that the people that I know and love become unsafe to me or become unrecognizable. That type of feeling alone is maybe the scariest for me, where it's like, I used to know and love this person and now they are unrecognizable. Oh, it makes me want to like crawl under a rock. And needless to say, I really loved the way that that was explored in this book, and just the overall haunted house shenanigan. I did find out that this is going to be adapted into a movie, and Blake Lively is starring in it. So I'm pretty excited to see that hit Netflix. I will be watching that as soon as it comes out, because I feel like as I was reading this, and I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook is very well produced, I was just like imagining watching this as a movie, and I think it's gonna be so good, and I can't wait for it to come out. So let me know in the comments if you're excited to see it hit Netflix. I don't know when it's coming up, hopefully soon. So that is everything that I read in October. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you watched all my videos this month, I'm sorry that there wasn't anything extra in this one for you, but I really appreciate you being here nonetheless. And I'm in the middle of so many different books that I'm not reading for videos, but they keep getting pushed off because of video deadlines. So sometime soon you will see a bunch of books that have not been in any vlogs, because I am probably 50 to 70% of the way through at least 3 or 4 books that I am loving, but I just can't tell you about yet because I have not finished them. Okay, that is it from me. The next time you see me, we will be living in Costa Rica, which is so horrifying and also so exciting. I'm actually filming this a couple of days before the end of the month because we need to sell this bed and all of the other beds and all of the other furniture in our house because we are leaving in like 2 days. We'll be in Chicago for a week with Dan's family, and then we are off to Costa Rica for the next 6 months. So I'm scrambling to get everything done. Hence why not a lot of reading has happened outside of the video reading this month, but I'm super excited to take you all with me. I can't wait to embark on this new adventure with all of you, and I hope that you will stick around for the ride. Okay, let me know in the comments what you read this month. What were your favorites? What were your least favorites? What should I pick up? What should I avoid? And let me know if you have any thoughts or feelings about the books that we chatted about today, of course, as always. And with that, I will see you all next week with a video that will either have been filmed in Chicago or in Costa Rica. Who knows? I don't. I will see you then. Bye.